Has a broad meaning on what this can really mean. To me, humanity in the workplace is really being authentic and actually just showing up to work your full self and being who you are at the workplace. I think not everyone has that luxury, I think, in some organizations, in some types of functions within roles. But I think ultimately, the more that you can actually just show up and want to be there, I think you also need a common thread of the people that you work with and the leadership team that needs to be authentic as well, like this little guy right here. And so to me, humanity in the workplace is, having this sense of purpose and this sense of feeling like I'm a part of something, I think. But also just being truly authentic in the way that we communicate, the way that we collaborate, the way that we kind of just do day to day, what we do regardless of our level within an organization, how long we've been there, regardless of our function. So to me, that kind of encapsulates kind of the humanity part.
You would be next.
Pretty much building on what Ashley said, that we don't need to wear multiple layers of ourselves. And having a relationship with managers, leaders, and peers where authenticity can be brought out. But the biggest challenge with authenticity is vulnerability, right? They're interlinked. If I don't, as a leader, show my vulnerability, let's say in team meetings or in one-on-ones, or if my all hands is all about numbers, financials, slide-driven, very scripted, then the vulnerability of the organization will be contained to gossip or to corners of the office. So really, when I was listening to the two questions that were raised, the questions being raised are how do we scale a leader's emotional impact, or how do we educate our leaders into into showing the emotional vulnerability? Because that's not an easy one. If I'm the CEO, for example, I have a gazillion priorities. I better have a strong advisor next to me reminding me that, hey, along with your gazillion priorities, showing your emotional side is critical as well. And to a question regarding how do I influence and how do I get ahead of sticky topics, that's where the HR organization comes in. That do we have a strong people function that plays a catalyst role? So to me, humanity really, the reality, because about so many CEOs and executive leaders across cultures and just geographies, they care, they really care, they struggle with expression. Some of them express by throwing money at solutions, some of them express by working harder, working on the weekends, not sleeping nights, but they really struggle with expressing emotions, so that's what I'm
That's a little hard to follow. So what they said. I'll maybe add a few things. So to me, it starts from a premise that 99.9% of human beings have something really unique and special to offer the world. And that if we can find that thing and encourage it and help it grow and unleash it, that great shit will happen in the world. And I say 99.9% because there are a few assholes out there that I just kind of figure like, we're not talking about them. But everybody else, everybody here. And so that thing that's inside of us that we have to contribute to the world that's really special is under attack more or less from the time we're born. And parents, even good parents, steer their kids different ways, partly out of our own beliefs rather than what's actually right for the kid, sorry. Schools do all sorts of various versions of make sure you color, in the lines, and all sorts of other religious institutions and certainly political institutions. Basically, the world is sort of conspiring against that special thing that you each have inside of you, and your company is probably doing it alongside. And none of it is really out of a bad intention. It's not malicious. It's just the company has some agenda that they're trying to achieve. They have a strategy they're trying to carry out, and they're not necessarily making like your particular unique special self their number one priority. But I think more companies need to find a way to do that. So that's for me where it starts. Second thing, to me, humanity is not the same as humane. They're both important, but sometimes humans are not humane. And I really believe that if we want humanity, we actually have to create workplaces where sometimes the ugly dark side of people will come out, and then we have to deal with it. I mean, we shouldn't accept it, but we have to deal with it. And I think too many, especially big corporations, are so focused on never, ever, ever, ever seeing the seedier sides of humanity that they basically block all humanity just to make sure they never get any of the dark side of it.
What do you mean by dark side?
Well, people being nasty, even like, I don't want to assume anything, but if anybody here has worked in a large corporation, there's like a corporate American culture for sure is like, if anyone asks you like, hey, how you doing? The answer is always, great.
Yeah.
It's never like, well, shitty actually. I'll tell you a story. I mean, this is like a crazy weird story from a client of mine, but like, you'll see in a minute why it's crazy. I was working for a hotel company, and they were trying to bring more purpose into their workplace. And so one of their executives told me this story, that he was at a hotel in the Caribbean, I think it was, and they had a coffee shop in the hotel. And there was a woman working behind the counter. And a customer came in, and the woman behind the counter said, oh, good morning, how are you? And the customer said, I'm good, how are you? At which point the woman behind the counter responded, not so good, I have my period. Now, that's an odd response and a little bit too much information for someone that you've never met in the context of like, I'm just here to get my coffee, right? And so this hotel executive said to me, well, so I said to her, listen, when a customer asks you how you're doing, the only answer is, I'm doing great, and smile. And I was thinking, heck no, like, that's ridiculous. If I owned that coffee shop, I would rather have someone who worked there occasionally say something stupid and maybe even occasionally offensive, so long as because I can coach that. I can say, look, we don't say that and here's why. But rather than stamping out all the humanity. And that's what I mean. I mean, like, people sometimes do weird shit, sometimes inappropriate, all the way to criminal. And we should never accept bad behavior, but in your actual personal life, you'll have friends or family members who do shit that you'd rather they wouldn't do, and you pull them aside and you say, hey, like, I didn't appreciate that, don't do it anymore. So that's my second point, is humanity and humane are not the same thing. I would like both, but I just want to me, they're not the same thing. And then I just want to echo their points. I mean, authenticity is so important. It's like that special thing that you have, if you spend too much effort, like, shielding everyone else from what you think may be parts of it that they're not going to want to hear, or that maybe like, oh, I'll be embarrassed or whatever, they'll think I'm not smart enough, or they'll think it's a stupid idea or whatever. If we conspire against our own selves to not share what we're all about, that's a really terrible thing. So that for me is a very long-winded attempt to try and at least be on par with their very, very brilliant responses.
So, playing devil's advocate for a minute, I don't know why I did this, I don't like using that. So playing devil's advocate for a second, you kind of brought up this idea of like when you ask someone how you're doing and they're always like, great. I feel like not, like outside of the workplace, that happens a lot too. And so I'm wondering, is there really less humanity in the workplace than there is in life? Because I feel like so many people I know, whenever I ask them that or when they ask me that, they don't want me to launch into a diatribe about how bad my day was. They just want me to hear me say fine, and then we can move on with our conversations in our lives. So, like, are we kind of lying to ourselves or being dishonest when we say that oh, the workplace is less human than everyday life is?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, why do we ask that question, right? Because I think a lot of times, and I think things are mirrored in the workplace, like we do things because we think we have to do things, or we ask things or we say things because we feel like we have to. And kind of to Priyanka's point about, they don't know how to express themselves, sometimes leaders and CEOs. Sometimes I feel like it's just an automatic response. It's just like, oh, well, I have to always ask that. I don't really, sometimes we care. I think, that's the other side of humanity is caring and making the other person feel like you actually care, feel like you're authentically caring, not asking a question like that because you feel like you have to ask it regardless of what someone says, and you don't really want to listen to what they say, or you don't want to really kind of engage in that kind of conversation, which I think is a whole other, tangent when we talk about humanity in the workplace. Is I think some of the societal norms now, especially for younger generations, is less about having human contact and more about having digital interactions. And I think there's a lot of challenges going on in general in the world right now that is being mirrored in workplaces, especially for hate to use the term millennials, but people that are in their first real-time job out of college, not knowing how to behave, and when they're not prepared to have human interaction or prepared to have certain conversations, they will lean on, and we'll talk about some norm stuff later, but lean on digital technology. And I think technology is an interesting piece as well in this whole conversation about humanity in the workplace and out of the workplace, is the use of technology. And do we use that platform and that forum to hide or to mimic behind things, versus because we don't want to or we can't have those in-person conversations.
So then I guess Priyanka, is the siege, is the war against humanity and purpose, is that really something that exists primarily in the workplace, or does it exist differently in the workplace, or is it kind of the same in life and work, and it's just that we need to fight these battles wherever they are, and given that we're talking about the workplace, that's what we're focusing on now. But are these problems different, do you think, fundamentally, or is it the same problem that we need to solve in our everyday lives with the way we communicate and treat people? That's the same thing in the work.
I'll tell you, my biggest weakness is I'm an over-optimist. What that means is that, and I say this at work all the time, that for me everything has a solution, everything has a silver lining. So I'm adding that context before answering the question, only to cite some very positive examples I've come across that have balanced out profitability, technology, and scale at the same time, great culture. Recently came across this book, it's a 3-year-old book by the CEO of Red Hat Consulting. It's a $3 billion consulting firm. When the current CEO, Jim Whitehurst, if I remember his name right, it wasn't at the scale and the profitability that it was. In a recent article, he said that he actually encourages crying or cussing at workplace, because you know what, if somebody is crying over a project that's failing, or if somebody is crying because they're scared they will fail, they care. And so that's one positive example. And to your question regarding are we mirroring real life, there's another concept of the purpose economy, which says that purpose is not we think of purpose as this highly romanticized concept, that one day in my life I will have an epiphany, I'll find my purpose and I'll chase it. Whereas I belong in the other category which says that I'll find my purpose. And I was thinking about this panel discussion and how would I articulate to someone who is saying that I don't know what my purpose is and how should I link it to my day job? And try it if this works. I came up with this orbit approach. Today, let's say my job is X, I could be a payroll specialist, I could be a training manager, I could be a CEO, I could be a product manager. If I draw 3 orbits around my job, my first orbit is my primary stakeholders, people whom I'm accountable to. Secondary orbit is my secondary stakeholders who get a secondary influence of what I do. Tertiary is my outer layer. Keep drawing those circles till you don't get to the point of what is your purpose. I was once asked by this innovation lab that, you know what, I'm losing a lot of very talented product engineers because they're very passionate. They all want to join not-for-profits and startups that have a small mission, that have a strong mission. But all I am doing is creating a competitive HRIS product. How do I sell my purpose to them? And I said, hang on, let's take a step back. What's the biggest cause of drama in the workplace? We as HR waste so much of our time on systems and processes. Go tell the product engineer or go tell the product guy or the software engineer that by creating a robust product, you're eliminating drama from the life of so many HR professionals. That's your purpose. So, kind of long answer to your question that yes, there are gray areas in purpose and mission in both workplace and life. It's about how we catalyzing these dialogues and how we guiding people in figuring it out.
You might maybe add a little bit to that. How many people here, just raise your hand if you feel 100% comfortable all the time being fully yourself? Okay, we've had 3.
I know you, and I know that's not true.
So,
I'm just kidding.
congratulations. For the rest of us, it's a bit of a challenge. And so, I don't think it's fundamentally a different issue in the workplace than in our lives. I mean, part of humanity is we experience our own vulnerability in different ways and we don't always enjoy it. So that's okay, that's human too. The work part for me is, as you said, you're there for 8 to 12 hours a day in a pretty structured environment. Like even relatively casual and informal companies, it's still a much more structured environment than just like your relationship with your best friend or something. Like you don't have a lot of policies and processes and all that with your friends, but you will have that at work. And there are people at work, there are entire departments, sometimes HR, who spend a lot of time thinking up policies to structure the work experience. And so if you're gonna spend 8 to 12 hours in a place that you feel stifled, like that I pass someone on the street and they're like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, okay. And if I feel that was like a bit of an empty interaction, I'm gonna move on, it's okay. But if I'm at a party and I feel, and it's an 8 to 12 hour party, and every interaction I have feels as shallow and self-negating as that, I'm not gonna stay at that party. Work is a little different, I think it's more important. And to your point, the institution of work is a much, much more powerful institution in the world than most others. And so if we can get it right there, and I agree with you, we can, or none of us would be here, it will unleash a ridiculous amount of good in the world, much more than us trying to fix semi-inauthentic hallway responses, when someone's like, hey, I'll put that a little lower on the list of problems to solve.
So I guess what I'm taking from this is that the problem itself isn't necessarily different when it comes to a lack of humanity in life or work, but the workplace does present different challenges and might complicate or exacerbate the problem in different ways. So let's talk about that. What are some of the things that make this problem worse